All right, so today we're diving into something kind of simple,
Okay.
but it gets really fascinating when you look a little closer,
All right.
talking about the weather.
Okay.
You send over some interesting stuff about how it's
Mm.
more than just small talk.
Great.
So I'm really excited to unpack this with you.
Yeah, it's really intriguing, I think. Almost every culture on Earth engages in weather talk, you
All right.
know?
Yep.
It makes you wonder if it's hardwired into us somehow.
Right.
As humans, we're all subject to the whims of nature,
Right.
and maybe sharing that experience even superficially helps us feel connected.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's like this primal need to acknowledge the forces bigger than ourselves. Now, speaking of connections, one of your sources had this charming story set in Meadowville.
Okay.
This small town with a personality all its own. It starts with Claire, the town librarian, a bit shy, but with a sharp wit, and Mr. Bennett, a retired teacher who's known for his colorful bow ties and even more colorful opinions. They find themselves waiting at the bus stop on a spring morning with storm clouds brewing overhead.
A bus stop is almost a microcosm of society, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
People from all walks of life, thrown together briefly, with the weather acting as kind of a common denominator.
Absolutely. And this particular morning is especially dramatic because the storm is rolling in, but the bus is notoriously unreliable.
Oh.
So there's this tension in the air. Will they get drenched waiting, or will the bus magically appear just in time?
Mm.
Claire's debating whether to risk opening her book when Mr. Bennett, never one to shy away from a chat, breaks the silence.
Oh.
So here's where it gets interesting. Instead of the usual pleasantries, Mr. Bennett, with a twinkle in his eye, remarks on how the storm seems to be mirroring the town council's latest budget debate.
Yeah.
Chaotic and unpredictable.
Wow. So he's bringing a bit of local politics into the mix right off the bat.
Okay, so he's bringing a bit of local politics into the mix right off the bat. Claire, a little taken aback, decides to play along. And you know what? They actually end up having this spirited debate about fiscal responsibility, all framed around the metaphor of the approaching storm.
This illustrates a crucial point. Weather talk isn't just about exchanging facts. It's about finding shared meaning. Mr. Bennett used the weather as a springboard to connect with Claire on a completely different level.
Yeah, so he kind of gambled with that opening, and it paid off.
Yeah.
Now here's where the story takes a bit of a turn. Just as their debate gets heated, the bus pulls up, leaving them mid-sentence. They exchange these knowing glances, almost disappointed that the conversation has to end.
This abrupt ending is significant. It suggests that a genuine connection, however fleeting, was formed. They might never discuss town politics again. But that shared moment, sparked by the weather, created a sense of camaraderie.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder how many opportunities for these kinds of micro-connections we miss out on every day. Because we dismiss weather talk as just idle chatter. Maybe it's not always about forging deep bonds, but even a brief, enjoyable exchange can brighten someone's day.
Precisely, there's a certain magic in those. Unexpected moments of connection. And the weather, with its unpredictable nature, often acts as the catalyst.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
That's good.
Good. Now, you also sent in some material about practical tips for weather talk, which I found quite interesting. It goes beyond the basic phrases and delves into how to use weather talk strategically.
Yeah, that's what caught my eye, too. Because we all know the generic, lovely day, isn't it?
Yeah.
But how do you make it more engaging, especially when you want to move beyond those initial pleasantries?
Well, one tip that stood out was to tailor your observations to the specific situation. So instead of just stating a fact like, it's windy, connect it to something relevant to the person you're talking to.
Oh, so for instance, if I'm chatting with a colleague who cycles to work, I could say something like, that wind must make for a tough ride home.
Exactly. You're acknowledging the weather, but also showing that you're paying attention to their situation, which immediately personalizes the conversation.
It's like adding that extra layer of thoughtfulness. Now, another technique I found helpful was using the weather to segue into other topics. The source material gave this great example of a networking event where someone commented on the unusually warm weather for that time of year.
And that simple observation led to a discussion about climate change, which sparked some really engaging conversations.
Precisely. It's amazing how a seemingly trivial comment can open up these unexpected avenues for discussion. But it does require a bit of finesse, doesn't it? You don't want to force the conversation in a direction. That feels unnatural.
Absolutely. The key is to be observant and find those organic connections. For example, if you're at a party and someone mentions they love gardening, you could say, with all this sunshine, your garden must be thriving.
Right.
It shows you're listening and opens the door to talk about their passion.
Okay, so we're talking about actively listening for those cues. It's almost like a conversational treasure hunt. And the source material also mentioned using humor, which I think is so important. Weather, especially when it's being dramatic, can be pretty funny.
Oh, absolutely. Self-deprecating humor works wonders, especially if you're dealing with less than ideal conditions. Imagine you're meeting someone for coffee and it's pouring rain. You could say something like, well, at least my hair is already styled for the occasion.
I love that. You're acknowledging the situation, but also injecting some levity into it,
Mm.
which can instantly put people at ease.
Humor is disarming. And when it comes to weather talk, it can help you connect with people on a more emotional level. Because let's face it, we've all had those moments where we're battling the elements and feeling a bit frazzled.
Totally. Like that time I got caught in a sudden downpour without an umbrella and ended up looking like a drowned rat. Not my finest moment, but it makes for a funny story now.
See, you're already using the weather to connect with the listener through shared experience. It's relatable, it's human, and it makes the conversation more memorable.
So we're talking about bringing our own personalities and experiences into the mix. It's not just about reciting phrases from a textbook. It's about using the weather as a springboard for genuine connection.
Precisely. And the more you practice, the more you'll develop your own style of weather talk. You'll start to notice those subtle cues, those moments where a well-placed comment about the weather can spark a conversation, brighten someone's day, or even lead to something more meaningful.
Yeah, it really is amazing how something so simple like the weather can be this powerful tool for connection. But I think the key takeaway here is it's not really about the weather itself, is it? It's about using it as a starting point to discover those shared human experiences.
You hit the nail on the head. It's about being present, observant, and willing to engage with the world around you. And sometimes the most unexpected conversations can arise from something as mundane as a comment about the wind or the sunshine.
It's like we're unlocking this
Mm.
secret code of social interaction. It makes me wonder, what are some of the biggest mistakes people make? When it comes to weather talk, are there any pitfalls we should avoid?
One common mistake is treating weather talk as mere filler. You know something to say to avoid awkward silences. And when you do that, it becomes robotic and lacks genuine interest.
So it's about being mindful of our intentions. We should approach these conversations with curiosity and a genuine desire to connect, rather than just going through the motion.
Exactly. Another pitfall is focusing too much on the facts and figures. While it's fine to mention the temperature or the forecast, constantly bombarding someone with meteorological data can be overwhelming and off-putting.
It's like you're turning a casual conversation into a weather report. And I guess that ties into another point, being aware of your audience. What might be interesting to a fellow weather enthusiast might not resonate with someone who's just looking for a lighthearted chat.
Absolutely. It's about reading the room, so to speak.
Yeah.
Pay attention to their body language and verbal cues. Are they engaged? Are they trying to steer the conversation in a different direction?
Yeah, it's a reminder that good communication is a two-way street. We need to be sensitive to how our words are being received.
Precisely. Now, on the flip side, another mistake is being too hesitant to initiate weather talk at all. Some people worry about sounding cliché or boring, so they avoid it altogether, which is a missed opportunity.
Especially when you consider that a simple comment about the weather can be a really effective way to break the ice and start building rapport, especially in those situations where you're meeting someone for the first time.
Absolutely. And remember, even if the initial exchange doesn't lead to a deep conversation, you've still created a moment of connection, however fleeting, and that in itself has value.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm curious, what's one practical tip you would give our listeners to help them become a more masterful weather talker?
I would say pay attention to the details. Instead of just saying it's cold, notice the specific qualities of the cold. Is it crisp and invigorating? Or damp and bone-chilling? Those nuances can make your observations more engaging and memorable.
That's a great tip. It's about going beyond the generic and finding those unique details that make each weather experience special.
Exactly. And here's a final thought for our listeners to ponder. As you go about your day, try to notice how others use weather talk. What techniques do they use? What works well and what falls flat?
It's like turning everyday life into your own personal communication laboratory.
Precisely. And you might be surprised at the insights you gain and the connections you forge, all thanks to the simple art of talking about the weather.
Well, thank you so much for joining me in this deep dive. It's been a fascinating conversation, and I think we've all learned a lot about the hidden power of weather talk. Until next time, stay curious and keep those conversations flowing.